The sun hadn't yet risen over Puerto Esperanza when Marin Santos pushed his small wooden boat into the gentle morning waves. At 55, his body told the story of a lifetime at sea. Hands rough and cracked from salt water, skin darkened by years under the sun, and eyes that could spot a school of fish from impossible distances. He moved with the confidence of someone who knew every inch of his boat, every current of these waters. Another day, another try, he whispered to himself. A habit formed over 30 years of fishing alone. The boat's motor sputtered twice before catching, its familiar rumble a comfort in the pre-dawn darkness. Marin guided the vessel away from shore, watching as the sleeping village grew smaller behind him. Puerto Esperanza was a collection of brightly painted homes that had seen better days. Fishing boats lined up along its modest beach, and a small market where fishermen sold their daily catch. As his boat cut through the quiet water, Marin's thoughts drifted to his family. His daughter Rosa had been sick for 8 months now. The local doctor called it an autoimmune condition, words that meant little to Marin except that the medicines were expensive, and Rosa was too weak to work. Her 3 children, Miguel, Lucia, and baby Carlos, now depended on their grandfather's daily catch. Today will be better, Marin told himself, though he had said the same words yesterday and the day before that, and for many days stretching back through a difficult year. The truth was getting harder to ignore. The fishing had changed. Where once the waters teemed with life, now Marin and the other village fishermen spent longer days catching fewer fish, the massive commercial boats that appeared on the horizon a few years ago, floating factories with nets that could sweep up thousands of fish in a single pass. We had changed everything. Marin reached his usual fishing spot just as the first light of dawn touched the water. He cut the engine and prepared his nets with practiced hands. His movements flowed naturally, the result of doing the same task thousands of times. As he worked, he glanced at a photo taped inside his boat, Rosa and the children taken before she got sick. Their smiles fueled his determination. "The fish are out there," he said, "and I will find them." Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, beating down on Marin's back as he checked and rechecked his nets. By midday, he had caught only a handful of small fish, not enough to feed his family, let alone have extra to sell. The other fishing boats were scattered across the horizon, and from their positions, Marin could tell they weren't having much luck either. Jorge, his closest friend among the fishermen, motored his boat nearby during their usual lunch break. "Any luck today, old friend?" Jorge called across the water. Marin held up his meager catch with a shrug. "The sea is keeping her secrets today." Jorge nodded, understanding in his eyes. "My son says we should give up. Move to the city. Find factory jobs." He spat over the side of his boat. 40 years on the water, and he thinks I could work inside 4 walls. "What would we do in the city?" Marin asked, though they'd had this conversation many times before. "This is who we are." They parted ways, each returning to their patient wait for fish that rarely came anymore. By late afternoon, Marin's situation hadn't improved much. His thoughts turned to the village store owner, who had extended him credit for the past 3 weeks. How much longer would his goodwill last? And the medicine Rosa needed. The prescription would need refilling next week. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Most of the other fishing boats had already turned back to shore, accepting defeat for the day. Marin should follow. It was dangerous to be out after dark, but desperation kept him searching. He moved his boat farther out, beyond his usual fishing grounds, fighting against the voice of caution in his head. If he could just find one good spot, one decent catch, it would mean another week of food for his family. Another prescription for Rosa. The light was fading fast when Marin felt it. The slight change in the water, the instinct honed by decades at sea. He quickly positioned his net and was rewarded with a sudden weight. His heart leaped as he began pulling it in. This could be the catch he needed. But as the net surfaced, Marin's hopes fell. Tangled in the mesh was mostly plastic trash, bottles, bags, and broken pieces that had once been something useful. Among the garbage were only a few fish, small and barely worth the effort of cleaning. He sat heavily on the edge of his boat, the day's exhaustion finally catching up to him. Night was approaching, and he had little to show for 12 hours of work. With reluctant hands, he stored the few fish he'd caught and began the journey back to shore. The lights of Puerto Esperanza twinkled in the distance, homes and street lamps coming to life as darkness fell. Marin knew what awaited him there. His daughter's hopeful face, his grandchildren's hungry eyes, and his own growing sense of failure. The other fishermen would be at Carlos's little beachside cafe by now, sharing stories and a few cheap beers, finding comfort in their shared struggle. Marin usually joined them, but tonight he couldn't bear to face their questions about his catch. As his boat approached the shore, he spotted a familiar figure waiting. Miguel, his oldest grandchild, now 12 and already showing signs of becoming a man. The boy waded into the shallow water to help secure the boat. "Did you catch a lot today, abuelo?" Miguel asked, his young face serious in the fading light. Marin rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Not today, mijo, but tomorrow will be better." Miguel nodded, accepting this answer with the quiet resilience children often show in the face of adult worries. He helped Marin unload the small catch and carry it up the beach. "Mama had a good day today," Miguel reported as they walked. She sat outside for an hour and helped Lucia with her reading. Marin felt a small lightening in his chest at this news. "That's good. That's very good." Their home was small, 2 bedrooms with a central living space that served as kitchen, dining room, and gathering place. Rosa lay on the couch, her once strong body now thin, but her smile still bright when she saw her father. "You're late today," she said. "We were worried. The fish were hiding," Marin answered, setting down his catch. "But I found a few." Baby Carlos toddled over, wrapping his arms around Marin's legs. Lucia, 8 years old and already a good helper, was setting the table for dinner. The normality of the scene, family gathered at day's end, temporarily masked the worry that hung over them all. Later, after a simple meal had been eaten and the children were asleep, Marin sat with Rosa in the quiet house. "You went out too far today," she said softly. "It wasn't a question. A little farther than usual," he admitted. Rosa's hand found his, her fingers thin but her grip still strong. "The children need you safe more than they need fish." Marin nodded, but they both knew the reality of their situation. Without his fishing, there would be no money for food, for rent, for medicine. The options were few in a village like theirs. "I heard some of the younger men talking about a place," Marin said slowly, uncertain if he should share this with his daughter. "An island about 4 hours from here." "Isla de los Sueños," Rosa's eyebrows rose. "The Dream Island? The one from the old stories? No one fishes there. That's why the fish might still be plentiful," Marin explained. "The waters are dangerous, rocks, currents. But if the stories are true, the same stories that say the island is haunted?" Rosa shook her head. "It's too dangerous, Papa." Marin patted her hand. "Just thoughts. Nothing more." But in his mind, the idea had taken root. 5 days of poor catches had left them with almost nothing. The medicine would run out soon. Something had to change. That night, as he lay in bed, Marin made his decision. In the morning, he would prepare for a longer journey. He would stock extra fuel, more water, better supplies. He would leave earlier than usual, before the other fishermen were awake to question or warn him. Isla de los Sueños was a risk, but staying safe while watching his family go hungry seemed the greater danger now. He thought of Miguel's serious face, of Lucia's careful management of their meager food, of baby Carlos who deserved more than a life of constant want. "One good catch," he whispered into the darkness. "Just one good day on the water." Outside his window, the moon cast silver light across the beach where his boat waited. Tomorrow would bring either salvation or more disappointment. Either way, Marin would face it as he had faced everything in his life, with quiet determination and hands ready for work. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of abundant waters and the weight of nets heavy with fish. Marin woke long before his alarm was set to ring. Sleep had come and gone in restless waves, his mind too full of worry to find proper rest. Outside, the world was still wrapped in darkness, the kind of deep night where even the earliest fishermen had hours yet before they would rise. He moved quietly through the small house, careful not to wake his family. From a cabinet above the sink, he took a small notebook and pencil. The words came slowly as he wrote by the dim light of his phone. "Gone to try new fishing grounds. Don't worry. Back by tomorrow night. Love, Papa." He left the note on the kitchen table, weighed down with a salt shaker. For a moment, he stood in the doorway of the bedroom where Rosa slept with baby Carlos. His daughter's breathing was even, her face peaceful in sleep. Marin whispered a silent prayer for her, then slipped out of the house. The village was silent as he made his way to the beach. Only a few dogs noticed his passing, one raising its head to watch before settling back to sleep. At the shore, his boat waited, rocking gently with the incoming tide. Marin had prepared it the night before. Extra fuel canisters secured to the floor, a large water jug, food enough for 2 days, and an old emergency kit that contained flares, matches, and a first aid kit he hoped not to need. Just this once, he whispered to himself, pushing the boat into the water. Just one good catch. The motor started on the first try, quieter than usual, as if understanding the need for secrecy. Marin pointed the bow east toward waters he had not visited in decades. The last time he had gone near Isla de los Sueños, he had been a young man working on his uncle's larger fishing boat. Even then, they had only skirted the island's waters, never landing on its shores. As the boat moved steadily through the dark water, Puerto Esperanza disappeared behind him. Ahead lay nothing but open ocean and the promise or threat of the island. Old stories returned to him as he steered. Tales of fishermen who went to the island and never returned, of strange lights seen from its shores, of fish so plentiful they leapt into boats. Marin didn't believe the wilder claims, but he knew the waters there were dangerous. Jagged rocks hid just beneath the surface. Currents changed without warning. Navigation charts marked the area with warnings. The first hint of dawn appeared as a pale line along the horizon. Marin checked his compass and adjusted his course slightly. According to his calculations, he should reach the island by mid-morning. He ate a small breakfast, bread with a thin spread of jam and a cup of coffee from his thermos, as the sky gradually brightened around him. Hours passed. The morning sun rose high, beating down on Marin's back and arms. The sea remained relatively calm, which he took as a good sign. Occasionally he spotted what looked like good fishing grounds and was tempted to stop, but each time he pushed onward. The promise of the island's untouched waters pulled him forward. It was nearly noon when Marin first spotted it, a dark smudge on the horizon that slowly took shape as he approached. Isla de los Sueños was larger than he remembered, its shores rocky and forbidding. Thick vegetation covered most of the visible land, reaching nearly to the water in most places. No beaches welcomed visitors, only sharp rocks and steep cliffs. As Marin approached, he reduced his speed, eyes scanning for the dangers he knew waited. The water changed color subtly, deeper blue giving way to a lighter shade that might indicate hidden rocks. He steered carefully, following a natural channel that seemed to lead toward a less rocky section of shore. The first sign of trouble was so small he almost missed it. A slight darkening of the sky to the west, clouds forming where there had been none an hour before. Marin frowned but continued his approach to the island. He was too close now to turn back without at least trying the fishing grounds. The island's waters didn't disappoint. As Marin reached a point about a quarter-mile offshore, he began to see fish, more than he'd seen in one place for years. Schools moved just beneath the surface, sunlight glinting off silver scales. With growing excitement, he prepared his nets. The first cast brought up more fish than he'd caught in the past 3 days combined. The second was even better. By the third, Marin was laughing out loud, his earlier fears forgotten in the joy of a good catch. These fish would feed his family for days, with plenty left to sell at the market. He was so focused on his work that he didn't notice how quickly the weather was changing. The wind picked up first, ruffling the water around his boat. Then came a distant rumble of thunder. When Marin finally looked up from his nets, the western sky had turned an ominous dark gray. The storm he had glimpsed forming earlier was approaching fast, much faster than it should have been. Not now, he muttered, looking at his catch and then at the threatening sky. Just a little longer, but the sea had other plans. Within minutes, the wind strengthened from a breeze to a stiff blow. Waves began to form where the water had been calm. Another rumble of thunder, closer now, warned of worse to come. Marin knew he should leave immediately, try to outrun the storm back to Puerto Esperanza. But that would mean hours of travel directly into the approaching weather. His other option was to seek shelter in the lee of the island until the storm passed. Neither choice seemed good, but the second felt marginally safer. He pulled in his nets, securing his catch as best he could, then turned the boat toward a small cove he had noticed earlier. If he could reach it before the full force of the storm hit, he might find enough protection to ride out the worst. The rain began when he was halfway to the cove, fat drops that quickly became a drenching downpour. Lightning flashed across the sky, followed almost immediately by a crack of thunder that Marin felt in his bones. The waves grew, lifting his small boat and dropping it with increasing force. He was within sight of the cove when disaster struck. A wave larger than the others caught the boat at an angle, pushing it sideways. Before Marin could correct course, another wave hit from the opposite direction. The boat lurched violently, then came a terrible sound. Wood splintering as the hull struck something hard and unyielding beneath the surface. Water rushed in immediately. Marin scrambled to grab essential supplies, a small bag with his phone, though he knew there would be no signal here, matches wrapped in waterproof material, a knife, and the emergency kit. He barely had time to secure these items before the next wave washed over the deck, nearly taking him with it. With the boat sinking beneath him and the shore still 100 yards away, Marin had no choice. He jumped into the churning water, the small waterproof bag tied to his belt. The cold shocked him, but decades of swimming in these waters had prepared him for this moment. He struck out toward the island, fighting against waves that seemed determined to push him back out to sea. Time lost meaning as he swam. There was only the next stroke, the next breath, the next wave to overcome. His muscles burned with effort. Twice he went under, swallowing seawater before forcing his way back to the surface. The shore seemed no closer despite his efforts. Then his foot struck something solid, a submerged rock. With new hope, Marin pushed forward until he could stand, the water now at his chest, then his waist. Finally exhausted, he dragged himself onto the rocky shore of Isla de los Sueños and collapsed. Rain still poured down, but Marin barely noticed. For several minutes he simply lay there, coughing up seawater and gasping for breath. When he finally found the strength to raise his head, he saw his boat, or what remained of it. The vessel was being dashed against rocks farther down the shore, breaking apart even as he watched. All gone, he whispered, thinking of the fish he had caught, the boat that had been his livelihood for so many years. Then with a pang that felt physical, Rosa, the children. The thought of his family gave Marin the strength to stand. He had to survive this, had to find a way back to them. First, though, he needed shelter from the storm, which showed no signs of weakening. He made his way inland, following what looked like a natural path through the thick vegetation. The rain continued to fall, but the trees provided some protection. After 10 minutes of difficult hiking, he found what he was looking for, a shallow cave in a rock face just deep enough to provide shelter. The cave was dry and, to Marin's relief, unoccupied by any wildlife. He sat just inside the entrance, watching the storm rage across the island. His situation was dire, stranded with limited supplies, no boat, and no way to call for help. But he was alive, and where there was life, there was hope. When the rain finally eased several hours later, Marin ventured out to explore the island. He needed to find fresh water, possibly food and materials to create some kind of signal for passing boats. The path he followed led down toward a different part of the shore than where he had landed. This section of beach was rockier, with large boulders scattered across the sand. The storm had washed up debris, pieces of driftwood, tangles of seaweed, and human trash carried from who knows where. Marin walked slowly, eyes scanning for anything useful. That's when he saw it, half buried in the sand between two large rocks. At first he thought it was just another piece of debris, perhaps part of a boat like his own that had met its end against the island's unforgiving shores. But as he drew closer, he realized it was something else entirely. A container. Metal. Modern. About the size of a large suitcase but heavier looking, with clasps designed to keep it sealed against the elements. Marin approached it cautiously. This was no random piece of trash. Someone had brought this here, or perhaps it had washed up from a larger vessel. Either way, it didn't belong on this deserted island. He knelt beside the container, brushing away sand to reveal a sleek, gunmetal gray surface without markings or labels. His fisherman's hands, strong from years of pulling nets, grasped the container and tried to lift it. The weight surprised him. It was indeed heavy for its size. With effort, Marin dragged the container higher up the beach, away from the water's edge. Whatever was inside it might be useful. At the very least, it was a mystery that might take his mind off his desperate situation. As the sun began to set on his first day stranded on Isla de los Sueños, Marin sat beside the strange container, his knife in hand, looking for a way to open it, The metal container refused to give up its secrets easily. Marin worked at the clasps with his fishing knife, careful not to damage the blade. It might be his only tool for survival on this island. The sun sank lower on the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and deep purples. Soon it would be dark, and he needed shelter for the night. Tomorrow, he promised the stubborn box, patting its sleek surface. I'll figure you out tomorrow. Marin returned to the small cave he'd found earlier, gathering dry driftwood along the way. Inside, he arranged the wood for a fire, grateful that his waterproof matches had survived the swim to shore. The small flame brought welcome warmth as night fell and temperatures dropped. He ate sparingly from his limited supplies, a few crackers and dried meat, knowing he needed to make the food last. In the dancing firelight, Marin's thoughts turned to his family. By now they would have read his note. Would they be worried? Surely. He had promised to return by tomorrow night, and that was now impossible. His boat was destroyed, scattered across the rocky shores of this island. Rescue would only come if someone happened to pass by, not likely in these dangerous waters, or if the villagers organized a search party. They'll look for me, he reassured himself. Jorge knows these waters. He'll guess where I went. But even as he said it, doubt crept in. The island was far from their usual fishing grounds. It might take days for anyone to search here if they searched at all. Sleep came in fits and starts that night, interrupted by unfamiliar island sounds and worry for his family. When dawn broke, Marin was already awake, eating the last of his crackers and planning his day. First priority, find fresh water. Second, create some kind of signal for passing boats. Third, figure out how to open that container. A small stream solved his first problem, clean water flowing down from the island's interior. Marin drank deeply, then filled his water bottle. For his signal, he gathered the largest pieces of his broken boat that had washed ashore, arranging them on a high rock where they might be spotted from a distance. It wasn't much, but it was something. By midday, he returned to the mysterious container. In daylight, he could see it was well made, designed to be waterproof and durable. The clasps were complicated, not something that would open accidentally. Whatever was inside was meant to stay protected. All right, Marin said, sitting cross-legged beside the container. Let's try a different approach. Instead of fighting with the clasps, he examined the hinges on the opposite side. They were strong but exposed. If he could somehow separate these from the body of the container. For the next hour, Marin worked steadily, using his knife and a sharp stone to gradually loosen one hinge, then another. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool ocean breeze. His hands, already rough from years of fishing, developed new blisters. Still he persisted. Come on, he muttered, feeling the final hinge giving way. Show me what you're hiding. With a metallic groan, the container finally surrendered. The lid lifted enough for Marin to peer inside. What he saw made him catch his breath. Money. Stacks and stacks of it wrapped in waterproof material. Marin sat back on his heels, stunned. His heart pounded in his chest. With shaking hands, he reached in and lifted out one package, carefully unwrapping the protective covering. The bills inside looked crisp and new. More money in one stack than he would earn in months of good fishing. It can't be, he whispered. But the evidence was right before his eyes. Thoughts raced through his mind, tripping over each other in their hurry. This money could change everything. It could pay for Rosa's medicine. It could provide education for his grandchildren. It could buy a new boat, bigger and better than his old one. It could give his family security they had never known. Marin unwrapped a second package, then a third, laying the stacks of bills on the sand beside him. He tried to calculate the total, but quickly gave up. The amount was beyond his experience, beyond his imagination. As the initial shock faded, questions arose. Why was this container here? Who did this money belong to? How had it ended up on this deserted island? The most troubling question was taking it the right thing to do. Marin had lived his life by simple principles. Work hard, care for family. Be honest. The money in the container hadn't come from honest work, that much was clear. It might belong to criminals, to people who had hurt others. Yet his family was suffering. His daughter needed medicine he couldn't afford. His grandchildren deserved better than a life of constant struggle. Maybe, he said slowly. Maybe this is a gift. Maybe God led me here because he knew we needed help. The justification felt hollow even as he spoke it, but he pushed his doubts aside. He needed to examine the money more carefully, to understand exactly what he had found. Marin took one of the bills and held it up to the sunlight, studying it closely for the first time. He wasn't familiar with currency. Rarely did he have enough to spend time examining it. But something about these bills seemed off. The paper felt right, but the colors weren't quite what he remembered. And there was something about the printing. He took another bill from a different stack and compared them. They were identical, down to the serial number. Marin's stomach tightened. He quickly grabbed bills from several stacks, laying them side by side. All the same, all with identical serial numbers. He had seen enough currency to know that wasn't possible with real money. "No," he said, the word escaping as barely more than a breath. "No, no, no." With growing desperation, he dug deeper into the container, hoping to find real money mixed in with the counterfeit. Instead, he found more of the same. Perfectly produced fakes that wouldn't fool anyone who looked closely. The realization hit Marin like a physical blow. The money was worthless, all of it. His miraculous discovery, his family's salvation, was nothing but a cruel illusion. Tears welled in his eyes, spilling down his weathered cheeks. A sob rose in his throat, followed by another. Alone on the beach of a deserted island, Marin Santos wept for his lost boat, for his sick daughter, for his hungry grandchildren, and for the brief, shining moment when he had thought their struggles might be over. "Why?" he cried out, his voice lost in the endless sound of waves against the shore. "Why show me this if it's not real?" No answer came except the cry of seabirds overhead. Marin's tears eventually subsided, leaving him hollow and exhausted. The fake money lay scattered around him, made worthless by its very abundance. Even the container, which he had worked so hard to open, now seemed to mock him. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, marking the end of his first full day on the island, Marin gathered up the counterfeit bills and roughly stuffed them back into the container. His movements were angry at first, then simply resigned. What did it matter how carefully he treated fake money? But as he pushed the last stack inside, his fingers brushed against something different. Not the soft give of paper, but something firm and flat. Frowning, Marin pushed the money aside and found a thin, waterproof pouch hidden at the bottom of the container. Curious despite his disappointment, he pulled it out. The pouch was sealed tight, but a small zipper along one edge provided an opening. Marin's fingers, clumsy with fatigue and emotion, fumbled with the tiny pull. When the zipper finally gave way, he tipped the pouch and watched as several items slid out into his palm. Papers folded carefully. A small electronic device he recognized as a satellite phone, and a handwritten note. Marin's heart began to race again. A satellite phone meant communication. It meant he might contact the mainland, might let his family know he was alive. With trembling fingers, he examined the device. It looked expensive and complicated, with buttons he didn't understand, but it seemed intact. Whether it still worked after who knows how long in this container was another question. He set it aside carefully, then unfolded the papers. The first appeared to be some kind of map, with locations marked in red ink. The second was covered in names and numbers, a list of sorts, though its purpose wasn't immediately clear. The third contained what looked like passwords or codes. The note was written in Spanish in a hurried hand. "If found, destroy all contents. The money is counterfeit, convincing enough to pass inspection but trackable. The real payment is information. Coordinates for all drop points are included. Battery life on phone approximately 24 hours of use. Contact only the number programmed as home. All others are compromised. Diego." Marin read the note twice, trying to understand its implications. Diego, that name was familiar. Where had he heard it before? Then it came to him in a rush. Diego Vargas, the drug trafficker whose face had been plastered across newspapers and television a few months ago, when he disappeared while under investigation. The authorities had been searching for him without success. Marin looked again at the maps, the lists, the satellite phone. He had stumbled upon something dangerous, evidence that could help catch criminals but might also put him and his family at risk if the wrong people discovered he had it. Night was falling again over Isla de los Sueños. In the growing darkness, Marin carefully gathered the papers, the phone, and the note, returning them to the waterproof pouch. The container with its counterfeit fortune he left on the beach, it held no value for him now. As he made his way back to the cave that would serve as his shelter for another night, Marin's mind was no longer focused on his disappointment. Instead, he was thinking about the satellite phone, about the information he had found, and about the choice he now faced. In the morning, he would try to make the phone work. He would try to call for help. But who should he call, and what should he tell them about what he had found? Morning arrived with a soft glow of pink and gold across the eastern sky. Marin had slept poorly, the waterproof pouch with its dangerous contents tucked against his chest all night. Every sound, the call of nightbirds, the rustling of leaves in the wind, had jolted him awake, as if Diego Vargas's associates might somehow know he had found their secrets. He sat at the mouth of the cave, watching the sunrise while turning the satellite phone over in his hands. It was unlike any phone he had seen before, larger, heavier, with an antenna that could be extended. There was no way to tell if it still had power until he tried to turn it on, and Marin hesitated to do that. Once he activated it, the battery would start draining. If the note was correct, he might have only 24 hours of use, and he needed to make that time count. "I need to think this through," he said aloud, his voice sounding strange after hours of silence. He set the phone aside and took out the documents again, spreading them on a flat rock. The map showed locations marked along the coastline, some near Puerto Esperanza, others further north and south. Each mark was labeled with dates and times. Marin recognized them as drop points, places where boats could approach shore without drawing attention. The list of names meant nothing to him at first glance. None were familiar from his village. But next to each name was an amount and a percentage. Marin's limited education had taught him enough to recognize these as payments. These people, whoever they were being paid to help with whatever operation Diego Vargas had been running. "This is bigger than I thought," Marin murmured, carefully refolding the papers. His options seemed clear, yet each path was dangerous in its own way. He could use the phone to call for rescue without mentioning what he'd found. That would be safest for him and his family in the short term, but the information would remain hidden. Or he could contact the authorities, share what he had discovered, and potentially help stop whatever criminal activity was detailed in these documents. The second choice carried risks. If Vargas's associates discovered he had been the one to turn over the information, they might seek revenge. Not just against Marin, but against Rosa and the children. Yet as he considered his choices, Marin kept returning to a simple truth. People were being hurt by whatever operation these documents described. Drugs flowing into communities destroyed lives. He had seen it in his own village. Young people lost to addiction. Could he live with himself if he stayed silent? With a deep breath, Marin made his decision. He would call for rescue first, make sure he would return to his family. Then, once safe, he would find a way to get this information to someone he could trust, someone who would use it properly and, protect his family from any backlash. He picked up the satellite phone again and pressed what he hoped was the power button. To his relief, the screen lit up, displaying a battery icon showing about half charge. The note had mentioned a contact labeled Home. Marin navigated through unfamiliar menus until he found a list of stored numbers. Only one was labeled Home. His finger hovered over the button to call. This was his way back to his family, but it might also connect him directly to Diego Vargas's organization. The note implied this was a safe contact, but could he trust anything written by a drug trafficker? Before he could decide, a sound caught his attention, the distant but unmistakable rumble of a boat engine. Marin quickly gathered the papers and phone, tucking them into the pouch, and hurried down to the shore. Hope and caution warred within him. This could be rescue, villagers searching for him, or it could be someone connected to the container, coming to retrieve it. He stayed hidden among the rocks, watching as a small fishing boat came into view around the eastern edge of the island. Relief flooded through him as he recognized it, one of the boats from Puerto Esperanza. He could make out two figures aboard, though they were still too distant to identify. Marin emerged from his hiding place, waving his arms and shouting. The boat altered course, heading toward where he stood. As it drew closer, Marin recognized Jorge at the helm with his son Alberto beside him. "Marin," Jorge called, his voice carrying across the water. "Thank God. We thought you might be dead." The boat approached as close as the rocky shore would allow. Alberto threw a rope which Marin caught and secured to a boulder, pulling the boat steadier against the current. Your family is sick with worry, Jorge said as Moran waded into the shallows. Rosa told us about your note, but when you didn't return, my boat was destroyed in the storm, Marin explained, gesturing toward the scattered debris still visible along the shoreline. I was lucky to make it to shore alive. Only you would be crazy enough to come to this cursed island in the first place, Jorge said. But there was relief rather than judgment in his tone. Come, let's get you home. Marin hesitated, glancing back toward the beach where the container still lay half buried in sand. There's something I found here. Jorge followed his gaze. What is it? For a moment, Marin considered telling his friend everything. About the container, the counterfeit money, the documents. Jorge was trustworthy, had been his friend since childhood. But the fewer people who knew about this, the safer they all would be. Nothing important, Marin said finally. Just some supplies that washed ashore. They helped me survive. He waded back to the boat, accepting Alberto's hand to help him aboard. The waterproof pouch was hidden beneath his shirt, pressed against his skin. Its weight felt enormous despite its small size. As Jorge turned the boat toward home, Marin looked back at Isla de los Sueños. The container was invisible from this distance, just another piece of debris on a deserted shore. He wondered if anyone would ever come looking for it, or if the storm had sent it so far off course that even its owners had no idea where it had landed. The journey back to Puerto Esperanza took several hours. Marin told Jorge and Alberto about the fish he had caught before the storm, about his swim to shore, about finding the cave for shelter. He did not mention the container or its contents. You were right about the fishing grounds, though, he said, trying to sound casual. More fish than I've seen in years. If only the storm hadn't come. Jorge nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps we could return together someday in my larger boat. It would be safer with two of us. Marin made a non-committal sound, his mind elsewhere. The documents and phone seemed to burn against his skin, reminding him of the decision he still faced. As they approached Puerto Esperanza, Marin could see a small crowd gathered on the beach. Word of the search party had spread and families waited anxiously for news. At the front of the crowd stood Rosa, supported by Miguel on one side and Lucia on the other. Even from a distance, Marin could see the strain on his daughter's face. The moment the boat touched sand, Marin jumped out and waded ashore. Rosa broke away from the children and moved toward him, her steps unsteady but determined. They met at the water's edge, and Marin wrapped his arms around her, feeling how thin she had become, how fragile. I thought we'd lost you too, she whispered against his shoulder. Like we lost Mama. Never, Marin said fiercely. I will always find my way back to you. The children surrounded them, baby Carlos clinging to Marin's leg while Miguel and Lucia pressed against his sides. For a moment, all the worry about the documents faded. This was what mattered, his family safe and together. But as they walked back to their home, the villagers following with questions and exclamations about his adventure, the weight of the pouch reminded Marin that his ordeal wasn't truly over. He had survived the island, but the danger had followed him home. That night, after the excitement had died down and the children were asleep, Marin sat with Rosa at their small kitchen table. He had told her about the storm, about the loss of his boat, but had said nothing about the container. Now, in the quiet of their home, he wondered if he should share the truth with her. What is it, Papa? Rosa asked, noticing his troubled expression. There's something you're not telling me. Marin looked at his daughter, her eyes so like her mother's, bright with intelligence despite the illness that had weakened her body. She deserved the truth, and perhaps she would help him see the right path forward. I found something on the island, he began, his voice low to avoid waking the children. Something dangerous. Slowly, carefully, he told her about the container, the counterfeit money, and the documents. He showed her the satellite phone but kept the papers hidden. The less she knew of their specific contents, the safer she would be. Rosa listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled with each word. When Marin finished, she reached across the table and took his hand. You must turn this over to the authorities, she said firmly. Tonight. If these people discover it was me who... If you keep it, you become part of their crime, Rosa interrupted. Is that the example you want to set for Miguel? For Lucia and Carlos? Her words struck home. Marin had been thinking of protecting his family from physical danger, but Rosa saw a different kind of threat to their values, to the principles he had tried to live by and teach his grandchildren. There's a police officer, Marin said slowly. Officer Domingo. He was a year behind me in school. He's always been honest, even when others on the force were not. Rosa nodded. Then go to him. Now, while it's dark and fewer people will see you. Marin stood, decision made. Lock the door behind me. I'll be back as soon as I can. As he stepped into the night, the waterproof pouch tucked securely in his pocket, Marin felt a strange mixture of fear and relief. Whatever happened next, he was choosing the right path. Not the easy one, but the right one. The walk to Officer Domingo's small house on the edge of the village seemed both too long and too short. Marin rehearsed what he would say, how he would explain his discovery without drawing attention to his family. Before he was ready, he found himself at the officer's door, knuckles raised to knock. He hesitated only a moment before rapping firmly on the wooden frame. Whatever consequences came, he would face them. For his family, for himself, for the person he had always tried to be. The door opened on the third knock, revealing Officer Domingo in simple house clothes rather than his uniform. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by confusion. Marin, I heard you were found today. What brings you here so late? I need to speak with you, Marin said quietly. In private. It's important. Something in his tone must have conveyed the urgency because Domingo stepped back without further questions, inviting him inside. The officer's home was modest, similar to Marin's own but neater with fewer signs of children. A single lamp lit the main room, casting warm light over simple furniture. My wife is asleep, Domingo explained, keeping his voice low. We can talk here. Marin sat at the small kitchen table, gathering his thoughts. Now that the moment had come, he found himself hesitating. Once he handed over the evidence, there would be no going back. What I'm about to tell you, he began slowly, puts my family at risk. I need your word that you'll protect them, that their names will stay out of official reports. Domingo's expression grew serious. You have my word as an officer and as your friend. But Marin, if you've done something illegal, not me, Marin interrupted. But I found something. He reached into his pocket and withdrew the waterproof pouch. On the island, something that wasn't meant to be found. Over the next half hour, Marin told the full story. The storm, the container, the counterfeit money, and finally the documents and satellite phone. As he spoke, Domingo's professional training became evident. He asked focused questions, taking notes in a small pad he retrieved from another room. He examined the documents carefully, his expression growing more troubled with each page. Do you recognize any of these names? Domingo asked, pointing to the list. Marin shook his head. None from our village. But the locations on the map, some are nearby. Domingo nodded, his face grim. Diego Vargas's operation was bigger than anyone realized. We suspected he had people throughout the coastal region, but names, dates, locations. This is exactly what the federal authorities need. So you'll handle it? Marin asked. My family will never be connected to this, Domingo assured him. As far as anyone will know, these items were recovered during a routine patrol. You were simply a fisherman caught in a storm. Relief washed through Marin, but uncertainty lingered. What happens now? Domingo carefully returned the documents to the pouch. Now I contact my superior in the federal police. This is too big for our small department. They'll want the satellite phone. It likely contains data that can be extracted. The coordinates, the contacts, and the people on that list? The ones being paid? We'll face justice, Domingo said simply. Some may be minor players just taking money to look the other way. Others could be deeply involved. The investigation will sort that out. Marin nodded, feeling the weight lifting from his shoulders. He had done the right thing, placed the burden in capable hands. Now he could focus on what mattered most, his family. There's something else, Domingo said, his tone shifting. The federal police have been trying to dismantle Vargas's network for years. There's a reward for information leading to arrests. Marin's head jerked up. A reward? Substantial. I can't promise anything, but... Domingo gestured to the pouch. This is significant evidence. When arrests are made, you would be entitled to claim it, anonymously, of course. The possibility hadn't occurred to Marin. He had turned over the evidence because it was right, not because he expected payment. The thought of a reward, money that was legitimate that could help his family, was overwhelming. I don't need recognition, Marin said finally. But my daughter's medical bills, my grandchildren... I understand, Domingo replied. I'll handle everything. You should go home now, be with your family. I'll contact you when there's news, but it might take time. These investigations move slowly. Marin stood, feeling strangely light without the pouch. Thank you. Domingo walked him to the door. No, Marin, thank you. Many would have seen only the counterfeit money, tried to use it somehow. You saw the bigger picture. Under the cover of darkness, Marin made his way home, his thoughts churning with all that had happened in the past 3 days. The fishing expedition that had nearly killed him. The discovery that had briefly raised his hopes, then dashed them. The evidence that might now help bring criminals to justice. So much had changed, yet as he approached his small house, he realized the most important things remained constant. His love for his family, his determination to care for them, his belief in doing what was right. Inside, he found Rosa still awake, waiting anxiously at the table. It's done, he said simply. She reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. You did the right thing, Papa. Domingo mentioned there might be a reward, Maureen told her, not wanting to raise false hopes but needing to share this possibility. Nothing certain, but if arrests are made, Rosa's eyes widened. A reward would help with my treatments. And a new boat, Marin added. But it may take time, and we still need to manage until then. We always find a way, Rosa said with quiet confidence. The next few weeks passed slowly. Marin borrowed a small boat from Jorge to resume fishing, though he stayed close to shore, the memory of the storm still fresh. His catches were modest but sufficient to feed his family, with occasionally enough extra to sell at the market. Rosa's condition remained stable, not worse but not better either. The medicine was expensive, but they managed to refill her prescription when needed. Marin heard nothing from Domingo and began to wonder if anything had come of the evidence he'd provided. Perhaps it hadn't been as valuable as the officer thought. Perhaps the investigation had stalled. He tried not to dwell on these possibilities, focusing instead on the daily rhythm of life, fishing, caring for his family, helping Miguel with his schoolwork, teaching Lucia to mend nets, playing simple games with little Carlos. Then, nearly 2 months after his return from Isla de los Sueños, Domingo appeared at his door one evening. May I come in? The officer asked, his expression unreadable. Inside, once the children were sent to their room, Domingo got straight to the point. Arrests were made yesterday, he said quietly. 17 people taken into custody across 3 coastal regions. More will follow as evidence is processed, Rosa gasped softly. Marin leaned forward. The people from the list? Many of them. The satellite phone contained encrypted messages that helped the federal police connect more pieces. They found 3 warehouses with drugs ready for distribution. It's being called one of the largest operations in years. Marin nodded slowly, trying to absorb the news. So it helped. The evidence. It was the breakthrough they needed. Domingo reached into his jacket and removed an envelope. Which brings me to this. The reward has been authorized. He placed the envelope on the table. Marin stared at it, afraid to reach out, afraid to hope. Open it, Papa, Rosa urged gently. With trembling fingers, Marin picked up the envelope and broke the seal. Inside was a check with his name, and a number that made him blink rapidly, certain he was misreading. This can't be right, he stammered. It's correct, Domingo assured him. 5% of the value of the seized assets. The federal police were very clear. The information you provided was instrumental. Rosa took the check from Marin's shaking hands, her eyes widening as she saw the amount. This will cover my treatments. All of them. And Miguel's school. And a new boat, Marin added, finding his voice. A better one than I ever had. You've earned it, Domingo said, standing to leave. The official story remains that these items were found during a patrol. Your name appears nowhere in the reports. As far as the world is concerned, you're just a fisherman who survived a storm. After Domingo left, Marin and Rosa sat in stunned silence, the check between them on the table. Finally, Marin spoke. When I opened that container and saw the counterfeit money, I cried from disappointment. I thought I had found our salvation, only to discover it was fake. And now? Rosa asked softly. Now I understand that the real treasure wasn't the money. It was doing what was right, even when it was difficult. Even when it was frightening. 3 months later, Marin stood on the deck of his new boat, larger than his old one, with better equipment and safety features. He had named it Segundo Chance, Second Chance. Rosa's health had improved with proper treatment at a mainland hospital. Miguel was enrolled in a better school, with plans to study marine biology. Lucia and Carlos were thriving, their future now secure in ways Maureen had never imagined possible. As he guided the boat out into familiar waters, Marin gazed toward the distant horizon where Isla de los Sueños lay hidden beyond sight, the island of dreams where he had found both despair and hope. Jorge's boat appeared nearby, his friend waving a greeting. "Good day for fishing," Jorge called. "Every day is a good day now," Maureen replied, smiling up at the clear blue sky. He had lost his old boat and nearly lost his life on that island, but he had found something more valuable than any container full of money. He had rediscovered the power of honesty, the importance of courage, and the unexpected ways that doing the right thing could change not just his life, but the lives of many others. As seabirds circled overhead and the familiar weight of fishing nets rested in his weathered hands, Marin Santos felt something he hadn't experienced in many years. Not just hope for tomorrow, but contentment with today. "Thank you," he whispered to the sea, the sky, and whatever fate or providence had led him to that island and that container. "Thank you for the second chance."